The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the cramped briefing room aboard the USS Constellation. Captain Sarah Chun sat in the back row, her flight's suit crisp despite the early morning hour. Around her, 24 naval aviators shifted restlessly in their metal chairs, coffee cups steaming in the recycled air. The room smelled of jet fuel, strong coffee, and the particular tension that came before dangerous missions. Captain Marcus Razor Rodriguez stood at the front of the room, his sealed trident gleaming on his uniform. His reputation preceded him into every space he entered. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and more classified operations than most people could count. When Razor spoke, people listened. When he needed something done, it got done. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade through silk. What I'm about to share with you doesn't leave this room. We have 48 hours to extract a high-value asset from enemy territory. The mission parameters are unlike anything we've attempted before. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes focused on the tactical display that flickered to life behind Rodriguez. The map showed a mountainous region she recognized from intelligence briefings. Hostile territory, surface-to-air missile sites, and terrain that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. Our target is located here. Rodriguez pointed to a red dot nestled deep in a valley. Intelligence asset compromised, enemy closing in. Standard extraction protocols won't work. We need someone who can fly low, fast, and precise through terrain that would make a mountain goat nervous. Murmurs rippled through the room. Sarah had flown similar missions before, but something in Rodriguez's tone suggested this one carried unusual stakes. She glanced around at her fellow pilots. Most were good. Some were very good. But she knew what Rodriguez was really asking for. The approach window is 17 minutes. That's 17 minutes from insertion to extraction, accounting for enemy response time. Miss that window, and our asset becomes a headline in tomorrow's intelligence briefings. Rodriguez's eyes swept across the room. I need a pilot who can thread a needle while dodging bullets. Someone who doesn't just follow flight plans, but thinks 3 moves ahead of the enemy. Lieutenant Commander Jake Maverick Thompson raised his hand. Everyone knew Thompson. Flashy, confident, and undeniably skilled. He'd graduated top of his class at Pensacola and had more carrier landings than most pilots accumulated in their entire careers. Sir, I've flown extraction missions in similar terrain. My record speaks for itself. Give me the coordinates, and I'll have your asset back here before the coffee gets cold. Rodriguez nodded, but didn't commit. Anyone else? Commander Patricia Viper Williams spoke up next. She'd been flying combat missions since before Sarah had graduated from college. Experience written in every line of her weathered face. Confidence earned through countless dangerous flights. Captain Rodriguez, I've been coordinating with SEAL teams for 8 years. I know how you operate, understand the precision required. My squadron has a 93% mission success rate. Again, Rodriguez acknowledged the volunteer, but continued scanning the room. His eyes moved methodically across each face, weighing capabilities against requirements. Sarah felt his gaze pause on her for just a moment longer than the others. She knew what he was looking for because she'd flown missions that others couldn't. Not because she was reckless, but because she thought differently about problems. Where others saw obstacles, she saw opportunities. Where others calculated risks, she calculated possibilities. The silence stretched taut as Rodriguez continued his assessment. Sarah could practically hear the mental calculations happening around the room. Pilots weighing their chances, considering their records, preparing arguments for why they should be chosen. The mission requires flying through a canyon system that narrows to less than 200 feet at its tightest point, Rodriguez continued. Enemy radar coverage makes high-altitude approaches impossible. This isn't about showing off or proving anything. This is about bringing someone home alive. Sarah's mind automatically began working the problem. Canyon flying required more than technical skill. It demanded an intuitive understanding of aircraft behavior at low altitude, the ability to read air currents and terrain features, and Most importantly, the capacity to remain calm when the margin for error disappeared entirely. She'd grown up in Colorado, learning to fly small aircraft through mountain passes before she ever saw the inside of a military cockpit. Her father had been a bush pilot, and he'd taught her that flying wasn't just about controlling an aircraft. It was about becoming one with it, understanding its capabilities and limitations so thoroughly that the boundary between pilot and machine dissolved. Her service record didn't include the flashiest assignments. No dramatic carrier landings in heavy weather or high-profile air shows. Instead, she'd specialized in the missions that other pilots preferred to avoid. Low-altitude reconnaissance flights, precision supply drops to special operations teams. The kind of flying that happened in shadows and never made headlines. Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Hammer, Jensen stood up, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years in military aviation. My experience with Special Operations Coordination goes back to "Thank you, Colonel." Rodriguez cut him off politely but firmly. "I appreciate all the volunteers, but this mission has specific requirements that go beyond standard qualifications." Rodriguez moved to the tactical display and zoomed in on the target area. The terrain features became clearer, revealing why this extraction posed such unprecedented challenges. The valley floor sat nearly 2,000 feet below the surrounding peaks, accessible only through a winding canyon that twisted like a serpent through the mountains. Enemy intelligence indicates they've positioned mobile surface-to-air missile batteries at 3 key points along the approach route. Stationary defenses we can plan around. Mobile threats require real-time adaptation. The pilot we choose needs to think faster than enemy targeting systems. Sarah studied the display with growing understanding of why Rodriguez seemed so particular about his requirements. This wasn't just difficult flying. It was flying that required split-second decision-making while processing multiple threat variables simultaneously. The kind of mission where hesitation meant death and overconfidence meant failure. Additionally, Rodriguez continued, our extraction window coincides with a planned enemy patrol movement. Intelligence suggests we'll have company throughout the operation. This isn't a stealth mission. It's a race against time through hostile territory while under active pursuit. The room fell completely silent as the full scope of the mission became clear. Sarah felt a familiar stirring in her chest. Not excitement exactly, but a kind of focused energy that came when she encountered challenges that demanded everything she had. She thought about her training, her background, and the countless hours she'd spent pushing aircraft to their limits. Not for glory or recognition, but because understanding those limits meant she could operate safely within them when lives depended on her skills. Her hand remained at her side, but her mind was already flying the mission. She visualized the approach, calculated the variables, and began formulating contingency plans for the dozen things that could go wrong. Rodriguez's eyes made another sweep of the room, and this time they lingered on her longer. Something in his expression suggested he was seeing beyond service records and official qualifications. He was looking for something specific, something that couldn't be measured by conventional metrics. The asset we're extracting, he said quietly, is personally responsible for preventing 3 major terrorist attacks over the past 18 months. The intelligence this person possesses is critical to ongoing operations. Failure is not an option. Sarah understood. This wasn't just about flying a difficult mission. It was about ensuring that someone who had risked everything to protect others made it home safely. The weight of that responsibility settled across the room like a heavy blanket. I need a pilot who understands that sometimes the impossible is just another word for difficult, Rodriguez said. Someone who looks at this mission profile and sees solutions instead of problems. Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not doubt about her capabilities, but clarity about what needed to happen next. She thought about every challenging flight she'd ever completed, every time she'd found a way when others said there wasn't one. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Flying isn't about the aircraft, Sarah. It's about the pilot. Machines follow physics. Pilots create possibilities. Rodriguez was still scanning the room when Sarah quietly stood up. No dramatic gestures, no words. Just a calm, confident movement that drew every eye in the briefing room. The silence that followed felt electric. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Williams raised an eyebrow. Jensen's expression showed clear surprise. Rodriguez's eyes locked onto hers, and, for several seconds, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. She saw him taking her measure, weighing what he observed against what the mission required. Captain Chun. His voice carried a note of curiosity. Your service record indicates extensive low-altitude flight experience. Tell me about your most challenging mission. Sarah remained standing, her voice steady and clear. 3 months ago, sir. Medical evacuation from a forward operating base under active mortar attack. Patient was critical, weather conditions were deteriorating, and the landing zone was compromised. Standard protocols said the mission was impossible. But you flew it anyway, Rodriguez observed. I found another way, sir. Sometimes impossible just means no one has figured out the solution yet. A slight smile played at the corner of Rodriguez's mouth. What made the difference? Understanding that the aircraft and I weren't separate entities trying to accomplish a mission. We were a single system with capabilities that exceeded the sum of our individual parts. The room remained silent as Rodriguez processed her answer. Sarah could feel the attention of every pilot around her, some supportive, others skeptical, all curious about where this exchange was heading. Captain Chun stepped forward. Sarah moved to the front of the room, her movements economical and purposeful. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate, just walked with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of. Rodriguez turned to address the room. Thank you all for volunteering. Your willingness to accept dangerous assignments is exactly what makes this unit effective. However, this particular mission requires a very specific skill set. He turned back to Sarah. Captain Chun, the mission is yours if you want it. But I need you to understand what you're accepting. This isn't just about flying through difficult terrain. It's about bringing someone home who's already sacrificed everything for their country. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. I understand completely, sir. When do we begin planning? Rodriguez's smile became more pronounced. Briefing starts in 30 minutes. Mission launch is set for 0600 tomorrow. As the room began to empty, Sarah remained focused on the tactical display, her mind already working through approach vectors and contingency plans. She was dimly aware of mixed reactions from her fellow pilots. Some offered quiet words of encouragement. Others seemed less enthusiastic about her selection. Thompson approached as he prepared to leave. Good luck, Chun. Hope you know what you're getting into. His tone carried undertones she couldn't quite identify. Not hostility exactly, but something close to skepticism. Sarah simply nodded. Thanks, Thompson. After the room cleared, Rodriguez remained behind, studying the mission parameters on his tablet. Second thoughts, Captain? Sarah shook her head. No, sir. Just making sure I understand every detail before we start planning. What's your initial assessment? Challenging, but manageable, assuming we can adapt to changing conditions in real time. The key will be maintaining flexibility while staying focused on the primary objective. Rodriguez closed his tablet and looked at her directly. Chun, I've been doing this for a long time. I've worked with a lot of pilots, and I've learned to recognize something specific. Most pilots fly aircraft. The really good ones become the aircraft. Which one are you? Sarah considered the question seriously. Sir, I've never thought about it in those terms. But when I'm flying, especially in challenging conditions, there's no separation between what I'm thinking and what the aircraft is doing. It's like breathing. Automatic, natural, necessary. That's what I was hoping to hear. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow's going to test everything you think you know about flying. As Sarah left the briefing room, her mind was already deep in mission planning mode. She had less than 24 hours to prepare for what might be the most challenging flight of her career. But for the first time in months, she felt completely alive. The corridors of a ship buzzed with the usual activity, but Sarah moved through them with focused purpose. She had work to do, and someone's life depended on her getting it right. That responsibility didn't worry her. It energized her. Back in her quarters, she pulled out her personal flight computer and began running preliminary calculations. Terrain analysis, weather projections, fuel consumption estimates. The numbers told part of the story, but not all of it. The rest would come down to experience, intuition, and the kind of split-second decision-making that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Tomorrow would prove whether Rodriguez had chosen correctly. Sarah intended to make sure there was no doubt about the answer. Sarah's alarm buzzed at 0400, but she was already awake. Sleep had come in fragments between mental rehearsals of the mission profile. She dreamed in flight paths and emergency procedures, her subconscious mind working through dozens of scenarios that might unfold in the mountains ahead. The ship's corridors were quieter at this hour, occupied mainly by night shift personnel and early rising aircrew. Sarah made her way to the Flight Operations Center, where Rodriguez and his team had been working through the night refining mission details. "Morning, Captain," Rodriguez greeted her without looking up from the tactical display. "Sleep well." "Well enough, sir. Any updates on the situation?" "Enemy activity has increased in the target area. 3 additional patrol units moved into position during the night. Your extraction window just got smaller." Sarah studied the updated intelligence data. Red markers indicated enemy positions, their movement patterns creating a complex web of threats throughout the valley system. What had been a challenging mission 12 hours ago now bordered on the impossible. "How much smaller?" she asked. 14 minutes from insertion to extraction. Miss that window, and enemy reinforcements will make departure complicated. Sarah nodded, her mind automatically adjusting calculations. 14 minutes meant no room for hesitation, no time for second attempts, and absolutely no margin for error. Everything would need to happen with clockwork precision. "Captain Rodriguez, with respect, 14 minutes changes the entire mission profile. Most pilots would consider this time frame unrealistic." Rodriguez finally looked up from the display. "Most pilots, yes. But you're not most pilots, are you, Captain Chun?" Before Sarah could answer, Lieutenant Commander Thompson entered the operations center. His appearance was crisp despite the early hour, his expression carrying the kind of focused intensity that came before dangerous missions. "Sir," Thompson addressed Rodriguez, "I've been thinking about the mission parameters. With the updated threat assessment, perhaps a more experienced pilot should handle this extraction." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever her qualifications were questioned. Not anger exactly, but a cold determination to prove herself through actions rather than words. "Commander Thompson," Rodriguez's voice carried a note of finality, "the decision has been made. Captain Chun will pilot this mission." "Sir, I understand that, but Commander..." The single word from Rodriguez cut off Thompson's objection. "Your concerns are noted. Captain Chun, let's review the final mission brief." Thompson remained in the operations center as Rodriguez walked Sarah through the updated plan. She could feel his skepticism like a physical weight, but she refused to let it affect her concentration. The mission profile was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its execution requirements. Sarah would fly a modified Black Hawk helicopter through the mountain canyon system, navigating between known enemy positions while maintaining communications blackout to avoid detection. "Your call sign for this mission is Angel 7, Rodriguez explained. "Our asset is designated Package Alpha. Upon reaching the extraction point, you'll have exactly 3 minutes on the ground before enemy response forces arrive." Sarah studied the flight path displayed on the tactical screen. The route twisted through terrain that would challenge any aircraft, requiring constant altitude adjustments and split-second navigation decisions. One wrong turn, one moment of hesitation, and the mission would end in failure. "Sir, what about backup plans? If the primary extraction point is compromised?" "There are no backup plans, Captain. This is our only shot. If we fail here, Package Alpha doesn't get another chance." The weight of that responsibility settled across Sarah's shoulders like a mantle. Somewhere in those mountains, someone was counting on her ability to fly through impossible terrain under enemy fire. The kind of trust that couldn't be earned through training exercises or simulation flights. "Understood, sir. When do we launch?" 60 minutes. Your aircraft is being prepped now. Chief Master Sergeant Williams will brief you on the specific modifications we've made. As they left the operations center, Thompson fell in a step beside Sarah. Chun, I hope you understand what you've gotten yourself into. This isn't about proving points or making statements. Lives are at stake. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Thompson directly. Commander, I understand exactly what's at stake. That's why I'm flying this mission with complete focus instead of worrying about whether other people think I'm qualified. Thompson's expression hardened. This isn't about gender, Chun. It's about experience and capability. Then, let my experience and capability speak for themselves. In about 2 hours, you'll have your answer. Sarah left Thompson standing in the corridor and made her way to the flight deck. The pre-dawn air carried the salt smell of ocean spray and the sharp tang of jet fuel. Her aircraft sat in the center of organized chaos as ground crews completed final preparations. Chief Master Sergeant Williams approached with a tablet displaying modification specifications. Captain Shun, we've made several adjustments to your bird for this mission. Sarah listened as Williams explained the modifications. Additional fuel tanks extended her range, but added weight that would affect maneuverability. Enhanced communications equipment allowed real-time coordination with Rodriguez's team, but created new failure points. Armor plating provided protection against small arms fire, but further reduced her aircraft's agility. Chief, these modifications changed the aircraft's flight characteristics significantly. Have there been test flights with this configuration? Williams shook his head. No time, Captain, but the engineers are confident in their calculations. Sarah felt a familiar stirring of unease. Flying an untested aircraft configuration into hostile territory violated every principle of safe aviation. But safe aviation and mission success didn't always align, especially in special operations. Chief, I need a few minutes alone with the aircraft before final preparations. Yes, ma'am. Ground crew will be standing by. Sarah climbed into the cockpit and began her personal pre-flight inspection. Her hands moved automatically through control checks while her mind processed how the modifications would affect aircraft behavior. Additional weight meant longer takeoff distances and reduced climb rates. Change center of gravity would require constant compensation during maneuvering. But aircraft were just machines following physical laws. Pilot skill could compensate for mechanical limitations, and Sarah had spent years learning to extract maximum performance from every aircraft she'd flown. Rodriguez appeared at the aircraft door as she completed her inspection. Questions, concerns, second thoughts? No, sir. Ready to proceed. Captain, I need you to understand something. The asset we're extracting has been behind enemy lines for 3 months. Intelligence gathering operation that's prevented multiple attacks on American soil. This person has already sacrificed everything for the mission. Sarah Rodriguez gazed steadily. Sir, I understand the stakes. That's why this extraction will succeed. Rodriguez nodded and stepped back from the aircraft. Launch in 30 minutes. Weather window is optimal, but that could change rapidly in the mountains. As Rodriguez departed, Sarah continued her preparations with methodical precision. Equipment checks, communication tests, emergency procedure reviews. Every detail verified and double-checked because lives depended on her thoroughness. 20 minutes before launch, Thompson appeared at the aircraft again. Chun, last chance to reconsider. No one would question your decision to step aside for a more experienced pilot. Sarah looked up from her navigation computer. Thompson, what is it you think I'm missing? Experience? I've logged more mountain flying hours than most pilots in this unit. Technical skills? My qualification scores are documented. Judgment under pressure? My mission success rate speaks for itself. It's not about any of those things individually, Thompson replied. It's about the combination of everything that makes someone capable of flying impossible missions. Then, watch and learn, Sarah said quietly. In 2 hours, we'll know for certain whether I have that combination. Thompson left without another word, but Sarah could see the doubt in his expression. She understood his perspective. Her selection had surprised everyone, including herself to some degree. But doubt wasn't fear, and surprise wasn't the same as incapability. 10 minutes before launch, Rodriguez returned with final intelligence updates. Enemy patrol patterns have shifted again. Your approach window is now 12 minutes instead of 14. Sarah absorbed this information without visible reaction, though her mind immediately began recalculating fuel consumption and flight timing. 12 minutes meant flying at the absolute edge of aircraft performance while navigating terrain that demanded precision above all else. Any other changes, sir? Weather report indicates possible wind shear in the canyon system. Gusts up to 40 knots, direction variable. Sarah nodded. Wind shear in mountain terrain created downdrafts and updrafts that could slam an aircraft into canyon walls before pilots could react. Combined with the reduced margin for error, it meant flying by instinct as much as instruments. Understood, sir. Package Alpha will be extracted successfully. Rodriguez stepped back as Sarah began final startup procedures. The helicopter's engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, vibrations transmitted through the airframe as systems came online. Sarah felt the aircraft come alive beneath her hands, responsive to her inputs, but heavy with the modifications it carried. Ground crew cleared the deck as Sarah performed final control checks. Every system showed green. Navigation computer displayed the programmed flight path. Communications equipment maintained clear contact with the operations center. Angel 7, you are cleared for departure. Proceed to mission waypoint Alpha and await further instructions. Sarah lifted the helicopter off the deck with smooth precision, feeling how the additional weight affected its response characteristics. Climb rate was reduced as expected, but manageable. The aircraft felt solid despite the modifications, responding predictably to control inputs. As she turned toward the distant mountains, Sarah caught sight of Thompson watching from the flight deck. His expression remained skeptical, but something in his posture suggested he was genuinely hoping for her success. The coastline fell away beneath her as Sarah climbed toward mission altitude. Ahead lay mountainous terrain that would test every skill she'd ever developed as a pilot. Behind her, a ship full of people waited to see whether Rodriguez had chosen correctly. 12 minutes to extract package Alpha from hostile territory. 12 minutes to prove that impossible was just another word for difficult. 12 minutes to demonstrate that sometimes the right pilot mattered more than the safest choice. Sarah settled into the focused mindset that had carried her through every challenging mission of her career. The next few hours would answer all the questions that words couldn't resolve. As the mountains grew larger ahead of her, she felt completely calm. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd prepared for, what she was meant to do. Everything else was just noise. The real test was about to begin. The mountains rose ahead of Sarah like sleeping giants, their peaks shrouded in morning mist that would burn off within the hour. She flew at 3,000 feet, following the planned route toward the canyon system, where package Alpha waited for extraction. Her communications headset crackled with Rodriguez's voice. Angel 7, updated intelligence reports enemy patrol activity in sectors 4 and 7. Adjust approach vector to compensate. Sarah's eyes moved to her navigation display, processing the new information. Sectors 4 and 7 bracketed her original approach route, forcing her to thread between enemy positions with even less margin for error than originally planned. Copy that, Control. Adjusting route to avoid sectors 4 and 7. ETA to package Alpha remains unchanged. She banked the helicopter slightly left, following terrain features that provided natural concealment from enemy observation posts. The modified flight path added precious minutes to her approach time, eating into the already narrow extraction window. Below her, the landscape transformed from rolling hills to rugged mountain terrain. Sarah reduced altitude gradually, using ridgelines to mask her approach from enemy radar installations. The helicopter responded well to her inputs despite the additional weight of modifications. Angel 7, be advised that package Alpha reports enemy forces closing on extraction point. Timeline is now critical. Sarah's pulse quickened, but Her hands remained steady on the controls. Somewhere ahead, an intelligence asset was running out of time while enemy forces converged on their position. Every second of delay increased the risk that this mission would end in failure. Control. Angel 7 is increasing speed to maximum sustainable cruise. Request permission to exceed normal operational parameters. Angel 7, you are authorized to exceed operational parameters as mission requirements dictate. Bring our asset home, Captain. Sarah pushed the throttles forward, feeling the helicopter surge ahead as engines delivered maximum power. The aircraft vibrated more noticeably at increased speed, and fuel consumption climbed rapidly, but she could shave precious minutes from her approach time. The canyon entrance appeared ahead, a dark slash in the mountainside that looked impossibly narrow from her current altitude. Sarah began her descent toward the canyon mouth, checking and rechecking her navigation coordinates to ensure she was approaching the correct entry point. Angel 7, you are now entering communications blackout zone. Switch to emergency frequencies only. Good hunting, Captain. Copy, Control. Angel 7 going silent. Sarah switched her communications equipment to emergency-only mode and focused entirely on the flying task ahead. The canyon walls rose on either side of her aircraft, blocking radio signals, but also concealing her approach from enemy detection systems. The canyon floor lay 800 feet below her current altitude, but the flight path required constant altitude adjustments to follow the winding course through the mountains. Sarah's eyes moved constantly between her instrument panel and the terrain ahead, reading air currents and wind patterns that could slam her aircraft into canyon walls without warning. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Mountain flying is like reading a book written in wind and stone. The canyon tells you everything you need to know if you listen carefully enough. Sarah listened. She felt the subtle changes in air pressure that indicated wind patterns. She watched for visual cues that revealed updrafts and downdrafts. Most importantly, she trusted her instincts to guide her through terrain that challenged the limits of aircraft performance. The canyon narrowed as she progressed deeper into the mountain system. According to her navigation computer, she was approaching the section that Rodriguez had described as less than 200 feet wide. At her current speed, she would have only seconds to react to wind shear or unexpected obstacles. Sarah reduced power slightly, trading speed for maneuverability as the canyon walls closed in around her aircraft. The helicopter felt different at this altitude and configuration, requiring constant adjustment to maintain stable flight through the confined space. Then she saw it, the narrowest section of the canyon, where ancient water flow had carved a passage barely wide enough for her aircraft to pass through. The walls rose on either side like cathedral towers, their surfaces polished smooth by centuries of wind and weather. Sarah held her breath as she threaded the needle. Her aircraft centered precisely in the narrow gap with less than 50 feet clearance on either side. One gust of wind, one moment of inattention, and the mission would end against unforgiving stone walls. But the helicopter passed through the narrows without incident, emerging into a wider section of canyon where Sarah could breathe normally again. Her navigation computer showed she was 2 minutes ahead of schedule despite the route adjustments forced by enemy activity. Package Alpha. This is Angel 7 approaching Extraction Point Alpha. Confirm your position and status. Her communications headset remained silent. Emergency frequencies carried no response from the intelligence asset, who should have been monitoring for her approach. Sarah felt the first stirrings of concern as she continued toward the designated extraction coordinates. She rounded a bend in the canyon and saw the extraction point ahead. A small clearing next to the canyon wall, barely large enough for her helicopter to land safely. But no sign of Package Alpha, and no response to her repeated radio calls. Sarah circled the landing zone once, scanning for any indication of the intelligence asset she'd been sent to extract. Her fuel gauges showed consumption slightly ahead of projected rates due to the increased speed required to maintain timeline. She could afford to loiter for perhaps 5 additional minutes before fuel reserves dropped to critical levels. Package Alpha. Angel 7 is on station at Extraction Point Alpha. Please respond and confirm your status. Still nothing. Sarah's mind raced through possible explanations. Package Alpha could be injured, captured, or forced to relocate due to enemy pressure. Without communication, she had no way to determine which scenario applied. Then, she spotted movement in the tree line adjacent to the landing zone. A figure emerged from concealment, moving cautiously toward the clearing while maintaining cover behind scattered boulders. Sarah couldn't determine if this was Package Alpha or enemy forces setting up an ambush. The figure raised one hand above their head, displaying what appeared to be a reflective signal mirror. 3 flashes, pause. 3 flashes, pause. 3 flashes. International distress signal. Confirming this was indeed the intelligence asset she'd been sent to extract. Sarah brought her helicopter down into the landing zone, feeling the aircraft settle heavily onto uneven ground. The figure broke from cover and ran toward her aircraft, carrying a small pack but moving with the urgency of someone being pursued. Package Alpha turned out to be a woman in her 30s, dressed in local civilian clothing but moving with military precision. She approached the helicopter at a running crouch, clearly experienced in aircraft operations under hostile conditions. "Captain Shun," the woman shouted over the noise of the helicopter's engines. "That's me. Are you Package Alpha?" "Agent Martinez, CIA. We need to leave immediately. Enemy patrol is less than 10 minutes behind me." Agent Martinez climbed into the aircraft and secured herself in the passenger compartment. Sarah immediately began takeoff procedures, lifting the helicopter off the ground and turning back toward the canyon exit. "Agent Martinez, what's your condition? Are you injured?" "Negative, but I've been running for the past 6 hours. Enemy forces are coordinated and well-equipped. They know about the extraction." Sarah's blood ran cold. If enemy forces knew about the extraction, her return route could be compromised. The canyon system that had concealed her approach might now be a trap, with enemy positions established at key choke points to intercept her departure. "Did you manage to transmit any intelligence before compromise?" "Negative. Everything I've learned is in my head and on this data drive. If we don't make it back, 3 months of deep cover work disappears with us." Sarah pushed the helicopter harder than she'd ever pushed aircraft before, racing back through the canyon system while her mind worked through alternatives to the planned extraction route. Enemy forces couldn't have positioned assets throughout the entire canyon system in just a few hours, but they could certainly block the most obvious exit routes. As they approached the narrow section of canyon, Sarah's threat detection systems began beeping urgently. Radar signature consistent with surface-to-air missile installation, bearing directly ahead on their planned route. "Agent Martinez, hold on. We're taking evasive action." Sarah banked the helicopter hard left, abandoning the planned route in favor of a secondary canyon that appeared on her navigation system. The aircraft protested the aggressive maneuvering, but responded within acceptable parameters. The alternate route added 8 minutes to their departure timeline and required flying through even more challenging terrain. But it also took them away from known enemy positions toward a canyon exit that might not be monitored. "Angel 7, this is Control. You are past your scheduled extraction timeline. Report status." Sarah had forgotten that her departure from the canyon system would restore communications with Rodriguez's operations center. "Control, Angel 7 has Package Alpha aboard. We encountered enemy activity at Extraction Point and are departing via alternate route." "Copy that. Angel 7. Enemy activity has increased significantly throughout the operational area. Recommend maximum speed departure." "Already on it, Control. ETA to friendly airspace is 22 minutes. Sarah pushed the aircraft to its maximum sustainable speed while threading through the alternate canyon route. Fuel consumption climbed toward critical levels, but she calculated sufficient reserves to reach friendly territory with minimal margins. The helicopter burst from the canyon system into open sky, where Sarah could finally climb to higher altitude and increase speed toward home. Behind them, The mountains receded into morning haze that concealed the dramatic events of the past hour. Angel Martinez, you did good work back there, Agent Martinez said through the intercom. Most pilots would have aborted when they discovered the landing zone was hot. Most pilots weren't personally selected by Captain Rodriguez, Sarah replied. Besides, we're not clear yet. Still got 20 minutes to friendly airspace, and enemy air defenses could be anywhere. As if summoned by her words, Sarah's threat warning systems activated again. Multiple radar contacts, bearing north and closing rapidly. Fighter aircraft, moving too fast to be friendly forces. Control, Angel 7 has multiple bogies inbound from the north. Request immediate air support. Angel 7, friendly fighters are en route, but ETA is 15 minutes. Recommend evasive action and maximum speed. Sarah pushed the helicopter beyond its normal operational limits while scanning for terrain features that might provide concealment from pursuing aircraft. Enemy fighters would have significant speed advantages, but helicopters could maneuver in ways that fixed-wing aircraft couldn't match. Ahead lay a series of ridgelines that might provide temporary concealment. Sarah dropped to minimum altitude, using terrain masking to break radar lock from pursuing fighters. The helicopter skimmed just above treetops, while enemy aircraft searched for her position. Agent Martinez, this might get rough. Make sure you're secured back there. Don't worry about me, Captain. Just focus on getting us home. Sarah smiled grimly as she threaded between mountain peaks while enemy fighters circled overhead. This was exactly the kind of flying that had attracted Rodriguez's attention. Technical skill combined with tactical thinking and the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. 12 minutes to friendly airspace. Enemy fighters still searching for her position among the ridgelines. Fuel reserves approaching minimum levels for safe return. Sarah Chun was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she trained to do. The next 12 minutes would determine whether Rodriguez's faith in her abilities was justified. But deep down, she already knew the answer to that question. Sarah kept her helicopter at minimum altitude, using every ridge and valley to mask her position from the enemy fighters circling overhead. Her fuel gauges showed consumption rates that made her stomach tighten, but she couldn't afford to climb to more fuel-efficient altitudes while enemy aircraft searched for her. Angel 7, Control. Updated threat assessment indicates enemy has deployed search helicopters to support fighter operations. Multiple rotary wing contacts moving toward your last known position. Sarah's jaw clenched as she processed this new information. Enemy fighters she could evade using terrain masking and speed differentials. Enemy helicopters would be operating at her altitude with similar maneuvering capabilities, turning her advantages into liabilities. Copy, Control. Request immediate update on friendly air support ETA. Angel 7. Friendly fighters are still 12 minutes out. Weather conditions have delayed their departure from base. 12 more minutes of evading enemy aircraft while fuel reserves dropped toward critical levels. Sarah's mind worked through rapidly diminishing options as she guided her aircraft between mountain peaks that offered temporary concealment. Agent Martinez's voice came through the intercom. Captain, I've been monitoring enemy communications on my equipment. They've established a search pattern that's designed to force us toward a predetermined intercept point. Sarah glanced at her navigation display, considering the terrain ahead. The route to friendly airspace led through a valley system that would funnel her flight path exactly where enemy forces expected her to appear. Agent Martinez, are you picking up specific coordinates from enemy communications? Affirmative. They're positioning assets in the Valdez Valley, approximately 8 minutes ahead on our current route. Classic ambush setup. Sarah banked hard right, abandoning the direct route home in favor of a longer path that would take them around the enemy ambush position. The detour added crucial minutes to their flight time, while fuel consumption continued climbing toward dangerous levels. Her threat warning systems activated again as enemy helicopters appeared on her radar display. 3 contacts spread in a search pattern that covered most of the alternative routes toward friendly territory. They were being herded like prey animals toward an inevitable confrontation. Control, Angel 7. Enemy forces have anticipated our evasion routes. Request permission to engage if necessary. Angel 7. You're authorized to engage in self-defense, but your primary mission is delivery of Package Alpha. Avoid contact if possible. Sarah understood the implications. Her helicopter carried intelligence that could prevent future terrorist attacks, but she was flying an aircraft modified for transport rather than combat. Any engagement with enemy forces would place Package Alpha at enormous risk. But sometimes avoiding combat wasn't an option when enemy forces controlled all the available routes home. Agent Martinez, do you have any combat training? 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. I can handle myself if things get interesting. Sarah smiled grimly. Things are about to get very interesting. Hold on. She dropped her helicopter even lower, skimming just above treetops while following a creek bed that wound through terrain too rough for enemy helicopters to follow safely. The aircraft bucked and swayed in ground effect turbulence, requiring constant control inputs to maintain stable flight. Behind them, enemy helicopters spread out to cover multiple approach routes while maintaining communications with the fighter aircraft circling at higher altitude. Sarah was being tracked by multiple radar systems, her position reported continuously to enemy command centers. Angel 7, this is Raptor 11. Friendly air support arriving early at your position. Confirm your current coordinates. Sarah's relief was palpable as friendly fighter aircraft finally arrived in the operational area. Raptor 11. Angel 7 is following creek bed at coordinates 3748 north, 1152 west, heading 270 degrees. Copy, Angel 7. We have visual contact. Enemy fighters are breaking off and departing the area. Enemy helicopters are still searching, but we can provide cover. The arrival of friendly fighters immediately changed the tactical situation. Enemy fixed-wing aircraft departed rapidly rather than risk engagement with superior American fighters. But enemy helicopters continued their search patterns, apparently willing to accept the risk of air-to-air combat. Sarah climbed to a more efficient altitude now that enemy fighters no longer posed a threat. Her fuel gauges showed reserves approaching minimum levels, but she calculated sufficient remaining capacity to reach friendly airspace with carefully managed consumption. Raptor 11, Angel 7. Enemy helicopters are still actively searching for my position. Can you assist with clearing my route home? Angel 7. We're tracking 3 enemy helicopters in your vicinity. We can engage them if they pose a direct threat, but rules of engagement require hostile action before we fire. Sarah understood the limitations. Friendly fighters couldn't simply attack enemy helicopters without provocation, even though those helicopters were clearly hunting for her aircraft. She would need to continue evading detection while making progress toward friendly territory. Agent Martinez monitored enemy communications while Sarah flew through increasingly complex terrain to avoid detection. The intelligence agent's equipment provided real-time updates on enemy search patterns and coordination efforts. Captain, they're getting frustrated with their inability to locate us. Enemy commander is ordering expanded search radius and longer loiter time. How much longer can they maintain search operations? Based on fuel consumption estimates, approximately 25 minutes before they have to return to base. Sarah checked her own fuel gauges and navigation computer. 25 minutes was longer than she could maintain evasion while carrying sufficient fuel reserves for safe return. Something would have to change soon, either enemy search patterns or her own tactical situation. Raptor 11, Angel 7. I need to increase speed to maintain fuel reserves, but that will make me more visible to enemy search radar. Angel 7, Raptor 11. We can provide radar jamming to mask your signature, but it's only effective for short duration before enemy systems adapt. Sarah weighed her options rapidly. Radar jamming would allow her to fly faster and more directly toward friendly airspace, but once enemy systems compensated for the jamming, she would be completely exposed with no remaining tactical advantages. Raptor 11, Execute radar jamming in 30 seconds. Angel 7 will make maximum speed run toward friendly territory during jamming window. Copy. Angel 7. Jamming commences in 30 seconds. Sarah prepared her aircraft for maximum performance flight while maintaining altitude to clear terrain features between her position and friendly airspace. Everything would depend on maintaining high speed during the brief window when enemy radar systems were disrupted. Jamming active. You're clear for high-speed transit. Angel 7. Sarah pushed her throttles to maximum power, feeling the helicopter surge forward as engines delivered emergency power ratings. Airspeed climbed rapidly while fuel consumption spiked toward critical levels, but she was finally making direct progress toward safety. Her navigation display showed the boundary of friendly airspace approaching steadily as she maintained maximum speed flight through terrain that normally would have required careful navigation. The jamming created a bubble of invisibility around her aircraft, but she knew it wouldn't last long. Angel 7. Jamming effectiveness is decreasing. Enemy radar systems are adapting to our countermeasures. Copy. Raptor 1-1. How much longer can you maintain jamming? Estimate 3 more minutes before enemy systems achieve full compensation. 3 minutes. Sarah's navigation computer showed 4 minutes remaining to friendly airspace at current speed. She needed to find additional performance from her aircraft or accept the risk of exposure during the final minute of flight. Agent Martinez, we're going to need every bit of performance this aircraft can deliver. Are you secured for aggressive maneuvering? Affirmative, Captain. Do what you need to do. Sarah began a gradual descent that would trade altitude for additional airspeed while maintaining her course toward friendly territory. The helicopter responded well, accelerating beyond normal cruise speeds as gravitational energy supplemented engine power. But the descent brought her closer to terrain that offered concealment opportunities for enemy helicopters if they detected her position. Sarah was gambling that speed would carry her to safety before enemy forces could react to her appearance on their radar screens. Jamming effectiveness approaching 0, Raptor 1-1 reported. You'll be visible to enemy radar in approximately 60 seconds. Sarah's navigation display showed 2 minutes remaining to friendly airspace. 60 seconds of invisibility followed by 60 seconds of exposure to enemy detection and engagement. Everything would depend on whether her speed advantage could overcome enemy reaction time. Raptor 1-1. Prepare to engage enemy helicopters if they move to intercept after jamming expires. Roger. Angel 7. We're positioned to provide support. The final 60 seconds of radar jamming passed with agonizing slowness as Sarah maintained maximum speed flight toward the approaching boundary of friendly airspace. Her fuel reserves dropped into the red zone, but she calculated sufficient capacity to reach safety with minimal margins. Jamming has expired, Raptor 1-1 announced. You are now visible to enemy radar systems. Almost immediately, Sarah's threat warning systems activated as enemy helicopters detected her position and began converging on her flight path. 3 contacts, moving at maximum speed to intercept her before she could reach friendly territory. Angel 7. Enemy helicopters are moving to intercept. Time to intercept is approximately 90 seconds. Sarah's navigation display showed 90 seconds remaining to friendly airspace. Perfect timing by enemy forces, arriving at her position just as she reached safety. The next minute and a half would determine whether Rodriguez's faith in her abilities was justified. Raptor 1-1. Enemy helicopters are closing to engagement range. Request immediate assistance. Angel 7. We are engaging enemy aircraft now. Behind her, friendly fighters dove toward the enemy helicopters while Sarah continued her maximum speed flight toward safety. Her fuel gauges showed reserves that would last exactly long enough to reach friendly territory with no margin for combat maneuvering or route deviations. 45 seconds to friendly airspace. Enemy helicopters closing rapidly despite engagement by friendly fighters. Everything coming down to split-second timing and the last ounce of performance her aircraft could deliver. Sarah had never flown harder or faster in her life, but she could see the finish line ahead. Package Alpha would make it home safely, and the intelligence they carried would save American lives. The mission was succeeding exactly as Rodriguez had predicted when he'd scanned that room full of qualified pilots and chosen her. Sarah's helicopter screamed across the landscape at maximum speed while behind her, the sky erupted in aerial combat between friendly fighters and enemy helicopters. Her threat warning systems painted a chaotic picture of missile launches, radar locks, and aircraft maneuvering at the very edge of their performance envelopes. Angel 7, Raptor 1-1. We've engaged 2 enemy helicopters, but the third has broken through and is closing on your position. Sarah's jaw clenched as she processed this information. 1 enemy helicopter was still pursuing her, and her fuel reserves were too low to sustain evasive maneuvering. Everything would come down to reaching friendly airspace before the enemy aircraft could achieve weapons lock. 20 seconds to the boundary. Sarah could see it marked on her navigation display as a thin green line that represented safety for her and Agent Martinez. But 20 seconds felt like an eternity with an enemy helicopter closing from behind. Agent Martinez, enemy aircraft is still pursuing. This is going to be close. I understand, Captain. Focus on flying. I'll monitor threat indicators. Sarah appreciated the agent's calm professionalism under extreme pressure. Agent Martinez had spent 3 months behind enemy lines gathering intelligence that could prevent terrorist attacks, and she wasn't going to panic during the final moments of extraction. Missile launch. Agent Martinez called out as her equipment detected the signature of an air-to-air weapon fired from the pursuing helicopter. Sarah immediately began evasive maneuvering despite her critically low fuel situation. The helicopter rolled hard left while she deployed countermeasures designed to confuse incoming missile guidance systems. Her aircraft bucked and strained under the aggressive maneuvering, but responded within acceptable parameters. Missile has missed, Agent Martinez reported, but enemy helicopter is still closing. 10 seconds to friendly airspace. Sarah could see the boundary approaching on her navigation display, but she could also see that the enemy helicopter would achieve optimal firing position before she crossed that line. Second missile launch. Agent Martinez's voice carried new urgency as enemy forces fired again. This time Sarah had fewer options for evasive action. Her fuel reserves were so low that aggressive maneuvering could cause engine failure before she reached safety. She deployed additional countermeasures while making smaller control inputs designed to disrupt enemy targeting without catastrophic fuel consumption. The missile streaked past her aircraft, missing by less than 50 meters before impacting harmlessly in terrain ahead of her position. Sarah felt sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool cabin temperature. 5 seconds to friendly airspace. The pursuing enemy helicopter was lining up for a third missile shot when friendly fighters finally arrived to assist. Angel 7, Raptor 1-1, engaging your pursuer now. Behind Sarah's aircraft, American fighters dove toward the enemy helicopter with weapon systems active. The enemy pilot was forced to break off his attack run to defend against the incoming fighters, giving Sarah the precious seconds she needed. Angel 7, you are now in friendly airspace. Mission complete. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her as she crossed the invisible boundary that marked safety for her aircraft and passenger. Behind her, friendly fighters were dealing with the remaining enemy helicopter while she continued toward the extraction point where Rodriguez would be waiting. Control. Angel 7 reporting successful extraction of Package Alpha. We are in friendly airspace and proceeding to base. Outstanding work, Angel 7. Landing platform is prepared and medical personnel standing by if needed. Sarah checked her fuel gauges one final time. Red warning lights indicated critically low reserves, but she had sufficient capacity to reach the ship safely. The mission had succeeded with minimal margins, exactly as Rodriguez had predicted when he'd selected her for this assignment. Agent Martinez, how are you holding up back there? Never better, Captain. That was some outstanding flying under impossible conditions. Just doing my job. Though I admit this one pushed the limits harder than most. As they approached the ship, Sarah could see crowds of personnel gathered on the flight deck. Word had apparently spread about the extraction mission, and everyone wanted to witness the conclusion of an operation that many had considered impossible. Sarah brought her helicopter down onto the deck with practiced precision, feeling the aircraft settle heavily as engines spooled down. Ground crews immediately surrounded the aircraft while medical personnel stood by to assist Agent Martinez. Captain Rodriguez appeared at the aircraft door as Sarah completed her shutdown checklist. His expression showed relief, mixed with something that might have been pride. Captain Chun, outstanding work. Mission accomplished with textbook execution under extremely challenging conditions. Sarah climbed out of the cockpit, her legs slightly unsteady after hours of intense concentration and adrenaline. Thank you, sir. Agent Martinez performed exceptionally throughout the operation. Agent Martinez emerged from the passenger compartment carrying her intelligence materials. Despite 3 months behind enemy lines followed by a harrowing extraction, she moved with professional composure. Captain Rodriguez, Agent Martinez has intelligence that requires immediate transmission to appropriate authorities, Sarah reported. Already arranged. Agent Martinez, debrief team, is standing by when you're ready. As Rodriguez led Agent Martinez toward the ship's intelligence center, Sarah remained on the flight deck completing post-flight procedures. Her aircraft had performed flawlessly despite being pushed beyond normal operational limits, and she wanted to ensure ground crews were aware of any maintenance requirements. Lieutenant Commander Thompson approached as she completed her inspection. His expression had changed significantly from the skepticism he'd shown that morning. Chun, I owe you an apology. That was some of the most impressive flying I've ever witnessed. Sarah looked up from her checklist. No apology necessary. Thompson, you were looking out for the mission's success, same as everyone else. No, it was more than that. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on limited information. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. Sarah extended her hand, and Thompson shook it firmly. We all want the same thing, successful missions, and everyone coming home safely. Today we achieved both. As Thompson departed, Sarah finished her post-flight procedures and headed toward the ship's operations center where Rodriguez would be conducting mission debriefing. She wanted to provide complete information about aircraft performance, enemy activities, and lessons learned for future operations. The corridors buzzed with conversation about the successful extraction. Sarah heard fragments of discussion as she passed groups of personnel, their words carrying admiration for what had been accomplished under impossible circumstances. Did you see that approach speed through the canyon? Fuel reserves were practically zero when she landed. Enemy fighters and helicopters, and she still brought package Alpha home. Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction at the recognition, but more importantly, she felt the deeper satisfaction that came from executing a mission successfully when lives depended on her skills. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd prepared for, what she was meant to do. Rodriguez was waiting in the operations center when she arrived. Captain Chun, preliminary intelligence assessment indicates Agent Martinez's information will prevent at least 2 major terrorist operations. Your extraction today has quite literally saved American lives. Sarah absorbed this information without external reaction, though internally she felt the profound satisfaction that came from missions with clear, positive outcomes. Sir, I was honored to be selected for this assignment. The honor was mine, Captain. Your performance today validated everything I believed about your capabilities when I chose you for this mission. Rodriguez paused, considering his next words carefully. Chun, I need pilots who can think beyond conventional limitations. Officers who look at impossible missions and find ways to make them possible. Would you be interested in additional assignments with my unit? Sarah didn't hesitate. Absolutely, sir. This is exactly the kind of flying I want to be doing. Outstanding. We'll discuss details after you've had some rest. But I wanted you to know that today's mission represents the beginning of a longer association, not the end of a single assignment. As Sarah left the operations center, she reflected on the day's events. 12 hours ago, She'd been just another pilot in a room full of qualified aviators. Now she was Rodriguez's first choice for impossible missions that pushed aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits. The transformation hadn't happened because of what she'd said or how she'd presented herself. It had happened because when the moment demanded everything she had, she delivered exactly what the mission required. Back in her quarters, Sarah sat on her bunk reviewing the mission from beginning to end. Every decision, every risk calculation, every moment when success hung in the balance. She'd proven to herself and everyone else that impossible was indeed just another word for difficult. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions that pushed the boundaries of what aircraft and pilots could accomplish. But tonight, Agent Martinez was safe, critical intelligence was in American hands, and terrorist attacks had been prevented. Sarah Chun had found her place in the world, flying missions that mattered with a team that understood the difference between difficult and impossible. Sometimes the impossible just required the right pilot at the right moment, willing to push beyond conventional limits when lives hung in the balance. Rodriguez had seen something in that briefing room that others had missed. Not just technical competence or courage under pressure, but the specific combination of skills and judgment that made impossible missions achievable. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, she was already looking forward to whatever impossible mission would come next. She had found her calling in the space between difficult and impossible, where the margin for error disappeared and only excellence was sufficient. The SEAL captain had scanned that room, looking for someone special, and he had found exactly what he was looking for.